Morning, everyone. Monday, actually, this is afternoon. If you're on the East Coast, you're eating dinner when the time this clip goes up.
And if you're in Australia, it's Thursday.
It's a good point. So back from Vegas. I'm sick as a fucking dog. I'm dying here. But UFC 209 was a wonderful experience. As always, it was the third UFC fight I've gotten to attend. Really, I'm able to attend whichever ones I'm willing to go to. So UFC 210, although in Buffalo, still willing, but we'll see how that one works out. Regardless, I can promise you something. Every single title fight from here through the end of 2017 will be a lot more entertaining and better than Wonderboy versus Woodley 2. So Tyron Woodley won by a majority decision. It could have easily been another majority draw in favor, I guess, of Woodley in this situation. Class from Stephen Thompson after the fight in his press conference. Tyron Woodley is not going to make any new fans the way he handles himself in his press conference, but we kind of knew this already.
Yeah.
So, first of all, if you watch the MMA recap, the UFC 209 recap, we have a new contributor, Michael Wellman. You can follow him on Twitter. It's all in the video. He hosts a little show called the MMA Hour. I'm sorry, that's our Hawani show. It's called the MMA Word.
A little show called the MMA Hour?
It's called the MMA Word. It's good too, so please check it out. He's going to be contributing videos. He did a great job breaking down the entire card, top to bottom. So I wanted to give a proper introduction to Michael, or Mike, I think as he liked to be called, because a lot of people in the comments immediately were like, who the fuck is this guy?
Conor McGregor style.
Exactly.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Somebody actually commented with that, so I wanted to give a proper introduction.
So I watched the fight. And I have just some general takeaways. So let me just kind of set something on the table to start with. I hate when people come in and rip apart a card that on paper you were expecting this. Like the same people that came in and were booing Daniel Cormier when he fought Anderson Silva. That was always going to happen. That was exactly what we were expected. And then when you come in and you boo because Floyd Mayweather or Manny Pacquiao wasn't what you expected, then you've never watched a Floyd Mayweather fight in your life. You just came in expecting that. But in this instance, we had an example of how exciting this fight could be because we were at the first fight. And I am not going to criticize those, I don't think, that were upset at this card. Not because the fight didn't live up to expectation. It's just because I saw a severe lack of fearlessness in both fighters. And I will start by saying this fight, after what we've seen in the first instance, was almost like watching Taken 2 after watching Taken 1. You know, like you had such a badass example of Liam Neeson in all his glory, fantastic speech. And then the second, like most sequels you see out there, unfortunately Die Hard's exempt, by the way, because all Die Hards are great. Yeah, sure.
That's a good point.
It was just, we had such high expectations because we witnessed heart, we witnessed technique, we witnessed just everything that you expect to be part of mixed martial arts. And we talked about this on the recap because we were supposed to mention McGregor and Eddie Alvarez on our recap, but we mostly talked about this fight when we did our recap back of UFC 205. We were like, it was a phenomenal example of everything that goes into making this sport brilliant because Wonderboy had the heart and the tenacity to keep coming back. Tyron Woodley looked more physically in shape and looked like the one who was expected to come out on top. And in this example, we had similar instances as what we've seen, but we just never really seen that heart, I don't think.
Yeah, touching on a few points what you said. For one, Liam Neeson in Taken is a bad father. How did you lose your wife, your family,
your whole family?
At some point,
and then now they've made
your daughter, your dog.
Now not that making like 8 Takens is bad enough. They now have a show called Taken. It's on, I think it's on Fox or something like that.
They can call it in general. It should just be called Bad Parenting.
Yeah, it's true.
It's much better. Keep it on. It's like first of all, I already did that. Jack Bauer was the original Taken in the first season of 24. So get your shit straight, guys. In terms of the fight, so as you mentioned, like they were booing. In the way that they were booing, similar to how they were booing Cormier and Silva. That's just fans being dumb. In this case, they were chanting fight, fight, fight. And you got about 30 seconds of a fight in the 5th round. Now, what's interesting is that this score, I'm going to show you the scorecard because there's a 10-8 from one of the judges, which is why Woodley won. It's Chris Lee on the right-hand side. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't. Yes, it was. He gave him a 10-8, didn't he?
10-8.
Where is it?
10-8, that's the middle one.
Sorry, middle one, thank you. D'Amato gave Woodley a 10-8 in round 5. And I think part of the reason he did that was because such little action, such long periods of nothing.
Yeah.
It made it seem like And he did. He almost knocked the hell out of fucking Wonderboy at the end of that fight. He almost stopped it. They almost called it. They didn't, though. But that's not even, I've seen stoppages like that happen, not stoppages. I've seen fights like that happen and then just not give him a 10-8.
Yeah.
So Woodley winning that to me was a little surprising. Granted, giving it a draw would have been even worse.
Yeah.
Because then you'd have to have a Wonderboy versus Woodley 3, and after what we saw in the second installment of this fight, it just wouldn't have been worth the money, wouldn't have been worth making a headliner, and it would have had to have been a co-headliner on top of a card that already got ravished by the fact that Khabib and Tony Ferguson couldn't fight because Khabib couldn't make weight, which was shocking. In Khabib's case, it was an inexcusable blow to his future, given what he has had to gone through to even get a fight like Tony Ferguson in the past. That was the third time it was supposed to happen. The first time Ferguson, the second time Khabib, and then the third time again on Khabib. So in terms of the scorecard, it was shocking that a 10-8 was given, but at the same time, I like how Luke Thomas was playing. I was telling you before, in his post-fight recap, he said, like, you know, I thought Wonderboy won the fight because he won 3 rounds, but I also don't care. Like, we've had 10 rounds of this fight. We've had 10 rounds of these guys fighting each other. We don't want a third installment of it. It's time to move on. Woodley, unfortunately, will be the one that holds the belt, and he'll probably face the winner of Damian Maia's next fight, which is in UFC 211. So you're looking at like UFC 213, 214 would be another welterweight title bout. And what's next for Wonderboy is interesting because when he goes and fights anybody except for Tyron Woodley, he's one of the most exciting fighters in the sport. Yeah. And he could headline cards. We saw it. This went from fight of the night at UFC 205 to the worst title fight in the history of the UFC.
We don't want to see a trilogy match. We don't need to see a trilogy match because and there will be Wonderboy fans out there that felt that he could have won that fight, and they'll talk about the fact that you mentioned that he won it like there's 3 of those rounds. He didn't do much to really prove that he won the fight. Yeah. So it's a double-edged sword because you look at it and he won rounds 1, 2, and 4. Granted, a lot of people could have claiming it was octagon control as to why he won rounds 1, 2, and 4, but there's a counter to that argument to the fact that if you're actually watching closely, Woodley wants to be back against the cage. Yeah. He wanted the entire time, and the reason for that is because when he explodes forward and pushes his opponent across to their side, he has vicious and quick combos, and he can knock you the fuck out, which he almost did exactly put in the last 2.5 minutes of the 5th round. So he also scored the takedown in the 3rd round. What did Wonderboy do aside from landing 2 head kicks, most of which were blocked, because he's a great kickboxer. It's where he got all of his experience from and why he rose to the top of the UFC in the first place. But also, you're talking about like, he landed 6 significant strikes in the 1st round compared to Woodley's 5. Yeah. I mean, are you really convinced? Are you really convinced? No. I don't know if my appetite for the UFC has just, after this weekend, has just took. It's a little bit less, I would say, than what it was, but it doesn't mean I'm not a huge fan, simply because I was reintroduced to how exciting British boxing can be. Do you watch David Haye get knocked through the ring? And that's the thing, is like, he didn't even, simply put, David Haye was fatigued, exhausted. He wasn't knocked out in that example. And I'm not the biggest fan of David Haye, but he fell through the ropes. He tore his Achilles. He literally suffered the injury. I was going to say play. 6 rounds. He basically went 5 rounds with a torn Achilles because he tore his Achilles in the 6th round. And Tony Bellew broke his hand in the 3rd or 4th as well. What that showcased was an example of nothing but heart in that fight. Tony Bellew, if you look at the man standing next to David Haye, he looks like someone you'd grab out of a pub. Would you say?
Well, that's a lot of UK. That's a lot of UK boxers. Sometimes they look like pub fighters.
And he does. It almost reminds you of, he's just got the heart of a lion. You know, he doesn't look aesthetically as dominant as what you would expect a boxer to look, especially in comparison to David Haye. But it was an exciting fight, and I'm excited to see if they will go and do a second one specifically because there was that tension between both. But you saw the sportsmanship at the end. David Haye, as much as he could have made excuses for the fact that he tore his Achilles, and I know a lot of people out there criticize him, I thought he was very honourable. He said afterwards, Tony Bellew was the worthy champion, better fighter on the night. I mean, the guy tore his Achilles. I know Kobe Bryant is known for finishing his free throws for doing it, but
he finished his free throws.
But the thing about David Haye struggling through a boxing match for 6 rounds, you have to give the guy some sort of credit for that. But I'll be excited to see if they do it again. And also, the world of boxing in Britain, I've always made the case that, they're subject to corruption like everyone else in boxing, and they're subject to promoters running the show. But there is some interesting matchups that have been happening. Anthony Joshua is a big-time fighter at the moment, and he's obviously going to be fighting Klitschko very soon. So the exciting times ahead. And maybe that's why I just was even less thrilled by the UFC main event. But
I loved it.
Doesn't mean I'm going to...
I loved every second. Even the bad fights I like watching in the UFC, especially when you're there. It's just a different experience. One really quick last note. Go to element number 3. Somebody pointed out in my direct messages on Instagram, they've actually been blasting it away at me. AKA, which is one of the MMA camps, which has an extremely respectable roster. Daniel Cormier, Khabib, Luke Rockhold, Cain Velasquez, like household names in the UFC. Also has a major injury problem. Now, the injuries aren't necessarily the same or anything to do with pulling out of a fight because you couldn't make weight. But in Khabib's case, this time around, he was 6 pounds away and still was hospitalized. So one of the things that I've been seeing a lot of the media say in terms of it is that there's no excuses. There shouldn't be excuses. Making weight is not necessarily easy, right? But it's still a fighter's responsibility. So why is this such a big blow to Khabib's future? Is because it's the 3rd time that fight was supposed to happen with Tony Ferguson. And if he had that fight, and if he won that fight, he'd be fighting McGregor next.
Yeah.
That would have been a forced fight to happen. So he went from potentially getting the biggest money fight of his career and a shot at the title, which he's wanted at 24-0, to possibly never fighting Tony Ferguson and possibly putting himself in a position to not fight for the title ever.
Yeah.
And that's a huge turnaround because at this point, you can't defend the fact that he missed weight on this one. He had his chance. And I hope he's healthy. I mean, he came out of he was so friggin' dehydrated, but he was still 6 pounds away. But it wasn't even close.
It's not rare to Khabib's personality. How long did he go without a fight? He hadn't fought, and I'm not saying
there was injuries. But that's also why I threw up the AKA American Kickboxing Academy's injury rate, because they have a remarkable amount of injuries that pull their fighters away. Velasquez has suffered them. Cormier suffered them. And I respect the hell out of Daniel Cormier.
And I'm not saying it to discredit him. I'm just saying there's some people out there, unfortunately, that are prone to injuries. It happens in every sport. You just get some that are unable to get to that level that they have to get to consistently in order to be able to perform and have the chance to defend or to compete for the ultimate fighting championship.
Joe Rogan Experience podcast with Dominick Cruz. Dominick Cruz fought, first of all, two of his title defenses with plantar fasciitis in one of his foots, his left foot. And then he fought Cody Garbrandt for 5 rounds with plantar fasciitis in both of his feet, to which he never made an excuse about it. He didn't even address it in the press conference. The first time it came out, I think, was during that podcast, or at least in the coming weeks up to it. He couldn't, when he woke up in the morning, he claims that he had to go crawl to the bathtub to get like a heated tub. He couldn't put pressure on his feet. This is before the fight took place. And stick his feet in there, and then he'd shoot Botox into his feet to keep it so off the pain. So there's some people who are insane, like Dominick Cruz, and that's respectable. You have other people who pull out of fights for whatever reasons they have be. So there's injuries that do prevent you from fighting, and there's ways to also handle those injuries and still fight. Which way you want to go, I guess I can't really argue against or with, because we're talking about fucking crawling across the floor, and then you're going to stand up and fight 5 rounds? That's remarkable. Listen to that podcast. It's really worth 2 hours of your time. Comment below, like, favorite, subscribe. UFC 209 in the books. We move forward. UFC Fight Nights this Saturday. Some good fights on that one. And we'll see you next time.